Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot, so my disguise must be able to strike terror into their hearts. I must be a creature of the night. Black, terrible, all these puppets. That's it. It's an omen. I shall become a puppeteer. Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Let me ask you a question. What makes a good comic? Probably your answer is good art, good story. Those are the most important. But here's another thing that can really help. Consistency. I'm talking a consistent tone, a consistent supporting cast, a consistent name for the hero. Well, I found a Golden Age hero that tosses all of that out the window and instead gives us a talking eagle that everybody calls a raven, a set of completely inconsistent superpowers, and no origin at all. Not even really a supporting cast. No, instead, this is a guy who decides to eventually name himself after his chosen profession, that of a puppeteer. So, without any further ado, let's get into the Golden Age superhero, the Puppeteer. Oh, remember how I just said that we were following a character called the Puppeteer? Well, in his first appearance, he actually went by a completely different name. The character debuted as Captain V in All Top Comics. That was a 128-page anthology title by Fox Features Syndicate, a somewhat cheap publisher who bought finished comic books from studios, like those run by Will Eisner and Jerry Iger. Captain V's art is signed by Alec Hope, which was a pen name used by Alvin Hollingsworth. Hollingsworth was a talented artist, one of the first African-American artists in comics too. That said, he probably is not the artist on the handful of appearances by this character. A character that looks a hell of a lot like another superhero published by Fox, V-Man. What do you think? Do you see a similarity in design between V-Man and Captain V? Maybe that's why in his second appearance, he started calling himself the Puppeteer. Of course, that makes that huge V on his chest pretty unnecessary. But the 1940s was all about rushing out as many comics as possible because they all sold well. They were all new, so it wasn't like everyone recognized Superman and Captain Marvel as being superior to the Puppeteer right away. This first story starts by saying, once again, Alan Dale has to leave his peaceful puppet shop and don the colorful garb of Captain V, challenger of all things evil. I love how mercenary the publishers were in saying once again, implying that this was not his first appearance. They want the readers to think, oh, this is a popular character that's been getting published for a while. It's totally made up. Oh, and this first appearance gives the character no origin at all. He's just already a superhero. And in his first story, he goes up against a criminal family. The story starts with Alan's friend Ed telling him that he's the only one who knows his secret identity. Then Ed invites Alan to Movie Land, which is apparently the knockoff version of Hollywood. There will be a party to raise money for the Red Cross. Little surprised they didn't use a knockoff version of that as well, like the Crimson Pentagram. Alan says, "Sorry, I have a date with a couple of kids to show them how to manipulate puppets. But you can take this puppet of Captain V for me." Alan would rather hang out with kids than go to a Hollywood party with beautiful starlets. Makes me a little worried about him, but okay, fair enough. He also has a puppet of himself just lying around. Vain, but let's go with it. The villains were hoping to seduce Captain V at a party, but they end up just stealing his puppet. And then they talk about their plans with each other to steal charity money. Unknown to them, Alan has hidden a microphone in his puppet. I knew I didn't trust this guy sharing his puppets with kids. Captain V overhears their plan and announces to absolutely no one, "It looks like once again Alan Dale, Puppeteer, will sit at his organ and play those mighty notes of freedom which will challenge the forces of evil and change him into Captain V." There's no origin here for Captain V, and yeah, he transforms into his superhero alter ego by playing with his organ. I will say, that is definitely the most bizarre transformation sequence I've come across in superhero comics, but I'll also give them credit for being completely original. Also, the specific tune he plays, the first few notes of Beethoven's Fifth. What was that? It went da-da-da-da. If you turn that into Morse code, that's the letter V. That's kind of clever. Captain V flies to movie land by a method called the V-beam, which we're told moves him at the speed of light. It's like a rainbow, but it's red, white, and blue, like everything legally had to be during World War II. From there, Captain V pretty much just beats the crap out of a bunch of henchmen for the gangsters, and also ends up having to save a movie director who imported actual crocodiles to his movie set. And why just fly the director away when you can beat the crap out of an innocent animal? The crime family sends in their hot daughter to seduce Captain V, which she does by putting knockout gas in her hair. And that works. It just goes to show, you shouldn't go around sniffing strange women's hair. Tale as old as time. The crime family ties the knocked out Captain V beneath a bridge and attaches a bomb to him. Looks like he's being hanged. A bunch of kids parade across the bridge, but fortunately, Captain V wakes up and struggles to get himself loose and drops with the bomb into the river below. It goes off, but Captain V then explains that the water deadened the bomb, and then he simply arrests the bad guys. I'm not clear on whether or not he has super strength or invulnerability. From the first appearance, all I could tell you is that Captain V can fly on a beam of patriotic light, and he's good at hiding listening devices in his puppets. But if you're a fan, good luck following him because every single appearance of his is in a different book. His next appearance is in Blue Beetle issue 46 in a story called The Adventure of the False Rajah. And as you can see, he's now changed his superhero name to the Puppeteer. I would argue that if you're a superhero and you're going to have a secret identity, maybe don't give your superhero name something that has to do with your chosen profession in your civilian life, especially if your powers have absolutely nothing to do with that job. You don't see the accountant jumping from rooftop to rooftop fighting the Joker. It's Batman. But the Puppeteer? No, he just decides on basically the worst code name I think I've heard until Skidmark from G.I. Joe. I'll never forget that there was an actual G.I. Joe with the code name Skidmark. Hasbro, what were you thinking? And by the way, the Puppeteer's name doesn't sound very heroic to me. There was a DC Comics villain named the Puppeteer, and now that I think of it, they also had an evil ventriloquist. Marvel had the Puppet Master. In fact, there was a whole movie series about killer puppets. I think of a puppeteer as a manipulator, but for the hero in this, that's just the way he pays his bills. By the way, this splash page exemplifies some common Golden Age tropes. We've got the artist changing, and the character's last name changing from Dale to Hale, which is just classic Golden Age inconsistency, and some casual racism by coloring the Indian men green. He was Alan Dale, Captain V. Now he's Alan Hale, the Puppeteer. And I have to wonder if this was the artists and writers having fun. There was a popular actor in the Golden Age of cinema called Alan Hale. He was usually a sidekick to Errol Flynn. His son, I bet you anything you've seen, he played the skipper. Alan Hale Jr. was the skipper on Gilligan's Island. Interesting choice for a name, right? That can't be a coincidence. I would argue this second issue is where this comic becomes great, or as close to great as it becomes, because on this next page, Alan is talking to a bald eagle and The bald eagle is talking back. Also, Alan calls this a raven, even though it's clearly a bald eagle. And also, the bald eagle named Raven can read the newspaper and points out a story about a Rajah visiting with some rare diamonds. Coincidentally, Alan knows the Rajah, so he goes to visit. Alan isn't a police detective or a newspaper reporter, but he is still able to point out that the Rajah's guard has an Irish accent and tied his turban wrong, so he and Raven know that something here is amiss. Alan and Raven sneak into the hotel but are immediately captured. Alan tries to cut some electrical wiring in his room, but he just ends up starting a fire. The bad guys weren't going to kill him, so Alan decided to put his own life in danger. His plan for escape? He shoves Raven through a small window, and Raven flies home to play some music on the organ, which apparently doesn't even need to be within hearing distance to transform Alan into, I guess the Puppeteer. And he definitely has super strength, because he's now able to smash a door to pieces and beat up some imposters. The fights are awesome. Puppeteer just flat out gets kicked in the dick. Raven flies around with a baseball bat to help, and they save their friend, a Rajah with the unlikely name of Pops. For what it's worth, I'd argue this is where the Puppeteer peaks. He's got about 6 more short stories, but really, how are you going to beat a story where a talking bald eagle fights a bad guy with a baseball bat in his talons? I mean, that is about as bonkers as a comic can get. From here on, the stories do get to be a bit repetitious. There's a lot of scenes of the organ playing and Alan becoming Puppeteer, Alan hiding microphones inside his puppets, and Raven doing unlikely things like buying himself a soda. One aspect of the Puppeteer that amuses me is that he never discovers crime on his own. He's always listening to the radio or reading the newspaper, and then decides to play his organ and stick his nose into the ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, the Puppeteer never got a super villain, just common crooks. These doofuses that try to plant bombs in dolls are the closest he gets to a thematic villain that relates to his obscure job. What was Fox Features Syndicate thinking, giving their title hero such an obscure job? I mean, yeah, if you read a lot of the Golden Age comics at the time, there were a lot of off-duty police officers, millionaires with all sorts of gadgets, newspaper reporters stumbling onto crime. And I'll give them points for originality. Maybe they were trying to come up with an everyman with a common job. But then you consider the fact that this guy has a magical organ and a talking eagle, and that relatability factor kind of just disappears. It vanishes into the ether like knockout gas in a strange woman's hair. Still, I definitely recommend the story of the Puppeteer fighting the fake Rajah and his men. That's kind of peak Golden Age ridiculousness. Anyway, I liked it. I tried to look into, were puppets especially popular in the 1940s, and didn't really come across any evidence of that whatsoever. I mean, there was puppeteering, but I would say that puppets became more popular in, the 70s with the Muppets. Anyway, what do I know? I just found a weird story and I wanted to share it with you. I know it's on the shorter side, but that's because I'm actually behind the scenes working on some long-form episodes that require a lot more research, and I wanted to just bring you something fun. I think what we can learn from it is honestly that consistency. And you get that with a supporting cast and a job that brings you across criminals that are actually interesting and over the top. It's a superhero story. Everything should be elevated. But all of his villains were just people trying to steal money. That's not that interesting, to be honest. He didn't even go up against the common enemies of the time, Nazis and, just actual mafia gangsters. He was always just going up against small-time crooks. It is what it is. Thank you so much for watching. I've got a little bit of behind-the-scenes stuff I'll talk to you about during the closing credits, but if you don't stay for that, please consider hitting like and subscribe, and I'll see you real soon. Just remember, keep reading comics. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching this episode. It means a lot to me. Working on several projects simultaneously, honestly. I'm about as busy as I've been. But I wanted to point out two things, because I've got two friends who happen to have crowd-funded Kickstarter campaigns for their comic book right now, and I wanted to share it because, you know, what kind of a friend would I be if I didn't? First of all, my co-host, Jim Mafood. He's my co-host on my channel Pros and Cons on the show Trash Movie Bonanza. Great comic book creator. He's got a crowd-funded campaign for Savage Street Vigilante. Parody of Batman. Looks amazing. It's doing gangbusters. I really recommend that. The link will be in the description below. And my friend Randy Stone is on issue 6 of his comic book, Bullet Adventures. That's kind of an all-ages, family-friendly superhero book about a super speedster. The art is fantastic in that book. Really, really good. Great stories. You can buy the previous 5 issues and other books that Randy's put out. He always pays his artists and writers and colorists and everything and gets it out in a timely manner, so I strongly recommend supporting that comic. It's fantastic, and you want good people like that in this field. I'm working on some stuff. I think I'll do a short sort of Transformers episode soon, and just to hint at what I've got coming up, I'm doing some long-form research on things like Tijuana Bibles. Those were these short, basically erotic comics that illegally used intellectual property. Characters like Popeye and Blondie and all sorts of stuff. Really popular from like the 30s all the way through the 60s. Just a weird niche of comic book history. And then I'm looking at like a bunch of artists that I love. I've always wanted to do an episode about Alan Davis. I've got a bunch of manga that I want to talk about, some interesting manga history, and a few other things that I'll just sort of keep hidden. But if you want some behind-the-scenes news and stuff, you can always support me on Patreon. That's really what makes this show possible, because I'll tell you something. Honestly, ad revenue on YouTube is just about bone dry. It's just crazy how little it is in the last few years. But, so this show wouldn't get made without my patrons. So thank you, folks. You're what makes it happen. If you can't afford that, I certainly appreciate things like, subscribe, and comments and shares. Those all help the channel a lot too. They really do. Thanks everybody. See you real soon.